Okay, this is kind of a lecture 2 for project 2, so kind of moving on to for project 1. So we're going to take a break from drawing in Revit a little bit and just I thought this, one of the colleagues did this in Touch 313 last time, and I thought it was a good thing to cover, especially under facility design. And I'm not 100% sure. There could be other parts of the program where it's covered, but I think as a designer, it's really good to know because you're kind of writing or reviewing these codes, and that's what you're designing off of. So interior designers, especially when you're doing the interior part, walkways, egress, stuff like that. And on the flip side of it, as a contractor, you're going to be dealing with code officials all the time, and you're going to be able to code plans, what's on the plans, and then calling the city for different code items. So I think it's good to look through, hey, just give you a quick overview of building codes and how they relate to facilities and how they relate to the plans, and how can we find out where our building codes are found in different stuff. Okay, so that's what this is over, and so I'll go ahead and get started. So if you want to type, if you're in class, you can just kind of type this, but if you're away, then you can write this down as it goes. So we're going to look at how our building's designed, right? So we talked a little bit about in the first one is with programming plan, we have an owner, but then we get into all these different square footages that are hit. How do we know when to go? What exits do we need to flow? When do we need a corridor? How do we make that building function correctly so nobody gets hurt? Okay, and so what comes about are building codes. Right, and within those building codes, there's different occupancy types. Right, so we're all familiar with different occupancy types just in general, right? And so each one is a general office. And as I'm talking about this, as we get into different building types, whether there's general office, education is one, so university, schools, educational, residential. Okay, so now we've kind of hit, we know about business, office, residential. A couple other ones is assembly. Okay, so when we start getting into assembly category, we're talking churches where large gatherings of people are happening, or we're looking at auditoriums or different items like that. Another one, I'm just hitting the kind of the popular ones, industrial. Okay, one thing that's kind of hot or hidden, or probably for most of you, is even the city of Springfield, we have a huge industrial park, and a ton of people work in there, and a ton of different functions go on in there with heavy duty equipment. And last one, now there's more occupancy types than this, but here's our kind of common ones that we know of. Medical would get hurt, we go to, and we expect certain level there. And so as you look at these different occupancy types, they all have different categories or issues that come along with them. Okay, general office to me is kind of one of the most easiest or simplest one. Normally people are working in the office. Most of them are I'm just thinking professionals. They have a type of degree. They're spaced out plenty. There's not much intensity working. It's mostly just people, computer, desk, and it's pretty low key. When we move into the next one's educational, we start putting more and more people into a more dense space. And we put more and more people into a dense space, stuff starts happening. Okay, other stuff could go wrong. And so the more people we put in there, then that leads into more issues or more strict codes that are dealing with. When I'm talking code, I mean fire alarm, fire sprinkler systems, certain building types, elevator requirement, I mean, all sorts of different things that go with that. Okay, we move into residential. If you think residential, between the two, educational and general office, is residential now is going to we're sleeping in the residence, right? And so we're not going to sleep in educational office. I hope we're not. unless you're small children educational. But now we started to do a sleeping function, which categorizes to other stuff that we have to do. Okay. Assembly is, if you think assembly or the church you've been to, is we're going to put a bunch of people all crammed in to one big room, and expect them all to get out safely. So that has its own set of rules that goes with it. Industrial. So now we could have a lot of people. We could have automotive stuff. We could have a huge heater boiler that's setting inside of an actual building that we have to deal with. And so we have all sorts of stuff that could go wrong in manufacturing and processing. And medical one it's a whole nother tier. When we go to a medical facility, we're expecting that building to function at its best, especially when we talk about ventilation, air conditioning, cleanliness in that area, how compartments are taken, how do we evacuate everybody. And so that just goes just in general of like all the varieties that you could have and what you have to think through. And I did go into a little depth on those two, but that's why kind of it's important. Okay, so I told you all that stuff just to tell you each building types has specific code-related items, and so we have to be aware about that. Okay, next question. Who determines the codes? Okay, so who determines the codes for your or for your building that's going to be at? And so they can be handled at the federal level, state level, and comes all the way down to the local level, and that's usually where your building codes are going to be adopted. Okay, if we're doing something that's kind of a state-funded project, oftentimes on the state code. If we're doing a federal one, we might look at the federal guidelines that we're going to have. But in most every case, whether if it's a state project, a government project, and in whatever city it's built in, whether it goes by those codes or whether it doesn't, they usually reach out to the code official and get approval for whatever codes that they're in. Okay, local governments decide on what code should be used to design the project. All right, let's look at the following city codes. So I'm going to look at Springfield. Let's run Springfield Mo here. We'll take a look at that. And I think it's important to know, designer or contractor, how do I find out? What codes are we in? How do I even know that? And it's kind of a fundamental, it's actually a lot easier to find out nowadays than it was 10, 15 years ago. But, I think when you come out and you're trying to figure this out, it's not always as black and white. And so really all you have to do is just Google. I'm going to do City of Springfield. I'll Google this up. As you can see, I have been there a couple times before. So go to City of Springfield. Oop, wrong Springfield. I gotta go to the right Springfield. First time, Springfield Mo. Okay, so we have all this information that's here. So I can pick departments, and I should be able to pick, give me just a minute. Planning and development. I believe that's it. Okay, this was planning and development. I actually think I have the wrong one. Government. And I'm going to do building and code related codes. And then I can click building codes. And then now it can tell me what building codes I'm under for the city of Springfield. Here's their adoptive codes. So they have selected the 2018 International Building Code, Plumbing Code, Fuel Gas Code, pretty much all the way through. They did the 2012 International Energy Conservation Code. We haven't updated that one yet. And the latest National Electrical Code. So that's how you find permits. Let's take a look at, let's do Republic. I'm from Republic. And real fast on the codes, we'll look at that here in a minute. So, Pocono city codes. Okay, City Republic finds it pretty easy. So let's Google that one up. I can find the one that we need, and they're in the same codes. They're actually they didn't actually do the energy conservation code, so I just didn't ignore that one. So here's the codes they have. They're in the 2018. So most of the time, at least around here, is most cities or most jurisdictions, Springfield will kind of lead the charge, and then all the outlining districts will kind of upgrade theirs. You go to small areas, like we can look at Fair Grove. Let's look at Fair Grove. Okay, their website's a little bit older. They still have some building codes here, so municipal codes. We can go to it. It actually takes you to Greene County. And Greene County, I believe if we go down here, there's some general provisions, content of code. I think we can find this somewhere in here, which one that we have. So even they have some, small towns. So they have everything kind of set up. I'm not going to navigate this one to figure which one it has. Like I said, I think it's based off the Greene County. So, all right. So looked at a couple codes here, Springfield, Republic Mo, and Fair Grove. All right. Okay, most cities in the Midwest here, if you're dealing Kansas City, Kansas, all the above, most of them deal with international building codes. So IBC, that's set here, and sections that go along with that. Okay, so most architects and designers, they'll use the International Building Code, and so they submit their plans to the city for approval. Okay, we want to get that building permit. We get that building permit. It allows everything, the city to know that everything that's going on is working correctly. Okay, as we're going through that, or as you continue on in your career and you get to deal with code officials, right? I just want to tell you kind of out front, code officials in general, they mean well and they're there for a purpose. So you'll have a designer that's working off a set of codes, and they try to make their design meet code. All right, and so the next thing is that code goes through there, we get code approval, and then the contractor takes it over. And so when the contractor takes it over, City of Springfield, they have a pretty good spots where contractors have to call and look for a code inspection, and they have inspectors come out and they look over their work. All right, and so the inspector can flag it or they can deflag it, so where if it's approved or if it's not approved. And I'll be honest with you, at times it can be frustrating when you're trying to get a set of prints through and the code officials keeps asking a lot of questions or concerns with it. It becomes a little bit cumbersome. But the other side of it, too, is when the contractor gets out there and they can't pass the code to get their to move on to the next thing, then it becomes frustrating as well. But the code officials, I tell you, are there, and they mean well for what they're doing, and it's a good service to society, because what the code officials are really trying to do are keep the occupants safe, right? And so we'll give you an example here. Let's just say, why is code important for design? End of the day, it wants to keep the citizens safe. Is what the main purpose of this. So we want anybody getting taken advantage of, and so let's go with pre-code and what could potentially happen, right? And a lot of the code, you have people out there that just don't mean well, and it could be developers, it could be just a contractor trying to make an extra buck, and at the end of the result is construction, in all reality, and developing is a very, very small part of the population to be dealing with. And so that small part of that population most of them are well-intended people and want to do well, but some of them just aren't. They're trying to take advantage. So by having those codes in places and those inspections, we're protecting the people. We're protecting let's say a developer comes in and is cutting corners in a house. Well, they're not going to be able to do that. Once they sell the house for a high mortgage and then they have issues or problems, then that person who purchased that house is stuck with that. Same thing goes with commercial buildings, right? So we want to do a strip center, and we're going to do it as cheap as we can, but then we're going to put people in there and have them basically be held accountable for the maintenance part of it, or be sure everything's operating. It's not a good situation. And so the main thing is to keep people safe, right? Citizens safe, right? Say protect their investments from developers and poor contractors. Okay. All right. Let's take a look. Got a couple things. I'll write this down. Just a thought to keep. Okay, so that just sums it up. So if you're sitting there 10, 15 years from now and you're having an issue with the code official or some code inspector that's out there, just remember this. Although they're difficult to work with, they're doing the right thing by holding people accountable. It's just kind of like the three branches of government: designer, contractor, and code official. And they all kind of work together to make people accountable for the greater good, right? All right, let's look at, so as designers, what are some code sections that are important in your building? All right, let's look up the code. All right, thanks to the internet, we got free codes. Codes used to cost you money, and I got a couple here. I always like hard copy. This here is the International Code Book, Volume 1, IBC. So there's 2 volumes of that. I'm going to set that down. All right, there's another volume here. One thing you can get if you buy the purchase one, you can get the commentary, what is called the commentary. It gives you more of a description. It's kind of a more of a cheat sheet or what the intent of that code is. Online, you really can't get that. You really got to buy always buy the commentary, because every once in a while it gets a little confusing, and you want to read additional information on it. So I've kind of opened this up here, and I'll let you guys track this down as well. Here's the website, so you can look at it. You may want to pause this and write this up. So I can go here, since if you really think about it, since people are going to be accountable for different codes and states, so they put all these online so you can read for free. So I'm going to we can go all the way back to 2006. That's when I started. We were looking at 2006, 2012. So I've been through a couple iterations over the course of the years. Right now, the hot one is 2021 is out, but most people they only adopt codes every 6 years. So they ever kind of adopt it because it takes so long to get everything up and going and then to match the city code. So let's look to 2008 here. You can see a variety of everything in this international, it's called the I-codes, building codes. We have an international building code, residential code, fire code, energy conservation code, fuel gas code, plumbing code, mechanical code, green construction code, existing building code, international swim pool, this one's interesting. International Wildland Urban Interface Code. International Property Maintenance Code. All right, so here's your big 3. IBC, IMC, International Plumbing Code. International Fuel Code, okay. IFC is okay too, so they're kind of in the lower tier. These other ones are very rarely hit, at least within the Midwest. All right, so let's take a look at the International Building Code here. And so you can see over here to the side, we can kind of look. The first thing I'm going to look at is Chapter 3. All right, so let me take a couple notes here on Chapter 3, and we can come back here. So Chapter 3, Occupancy Classification and Designation. All right, what is that? Okay. Okay, we're going to define what our occupants. So back up here, we were really looking at general office, education, residential, assembly, industrial, medical. So I'm going to go back here. So now here's all my classifications. So I went to highlighted ones, but I don't even have assembly, business, education, factory, or industrial. I had that wrong. High hazard, institutional, Marketel, residential, storage. Storage is a popular one I kind of forgot about. Utility and miscellaneous groups. And so what happens is you get into these assemblies, and it'll start telling you, what this space is here used for. Also tells you the assembly group that we have. And so assembly 1's motion picture theaters, symphony concert halls, theaters, banquet rooms. And so there's a little bit of interpretation. This is where you can kind of get into a beef with a code official. He might interpret one way, or you might have a unique space that you're just trying to figure out. Lecture halls could be one. So lecture halls would be one that could be potentially just educational, as in classroom facilities. So kind of got to gauge which one's the best one. Assembly 5, amusement park and structures. So business, this lists all the business types out here. Educational occupancies, E, there it is. Factory group, there's a list of all the different factory types. And I'll just kind of scroll down here through. I think you kind of get the hint. So this is what tells us what we're going to be, and it gives specific items. Okay. All right, let's look at the next one that I think is kind of important to know. All right, types of construction. So on your first project, we looked at brick and block or gyp and brick or whatever it happened to be on there. And so we had this construction type of the wall. And that construction type of the wall is important because the way that wall's built has different construction types. And what's important in the different construction types is how fast that thing burns. All right, so let's look at a couple here. So I'll minimize this and I'll go to Chapter 6, Types of Construction. There we go. All right, I'm going to scroll down here. So the types, it comes in types 1 and 2, and let's read this. Types 1 and 2 construction are those types of construction in which the building elements listed in Table 601 are non-combustible material except as permitted by 603 and elsewhere in this code. Okay. So if I'm in a type 1, type 2 construction, I'm really dealing with non-combustible material. And the best example that everybody can kind of relate to this on non-combustible material would be a school that's built out of brick and CMU block all the way through. So we have this brick and block that's going to be set there. Kemper is made out of massive amount of concrete, and so I don't know the exact classification, but I'm pretty sure that would be as class 1 or 2 that's set there. Type 3 has construction type listed for which exterior walls are non-combustible material and the interior building elements are made of any material permitted by this code. This could move into actually maybe what more Kemper is. Our exterior walls are non-combustible, but inside we have gyp and drywall that's put in there, and so that kind of moves us in that type. Type 4 is where construction in which exterior walls are non-combustible material and the interior building elements of solid wood, laminate wood, heavy timber. All right, so now we get into stuff where we're dealing with wood that's going to be in the building. And construction type 5, when we just don't know, and it's going to burn really fast, construction type 5. And so I've hit on two big ones, right? Building use, what the building's made out of, all right? And a lot of it comes back to fire and how much time you can get your occupants out of there. So, example, if I use a type 1, type 2 construction, then I might have a little less restrictions on if I got to sprinkle the building or how many fire hydrants I have to be in place. And so there's stuff that goes along with those restrictions. And so those two start working together just a little bit. Okay. So let me kind of jot down what I had here real fast. We had look at different types. I'm looking at different types. Okay. So type 5 is kind of anything applies that's made out of a wood that's in there. All right, next one, I'm going to look at Chapter 9. Okay, Chapter 9 is important because this we get into fire protection and life safety, and so let's take a look at this code here. combustible materials, types 1, type 2. Sorry, let me go to this section. Chapter 9, here we go. Fire protection, fire safety. So here's some general. I'll scroll down. Automatic fire sprinkler systems. And so once we define what those group A are, then we can see, okay, an automatic sprinkler shall be provided with stories containing A1 occupancies throughout the stories here. But we have to meet these conditions. And so if our building starts to exceed 12,000 square feet, we're going to have to sprinkle. If our fire area occupant load, we'll talk about next, exceeds 300, we have to sprinkle the building. If the fire is located on floor other than the level of discharge, such occupancies, we have to sprinkle the building. So if we have multi-story buildings, we're going to start going. The fire contains in a multi-theater complex. So you can see we're going to go through each division, and we've written out different scenarios of when it's going to be applied. One thing I'm going to look at here real fast, automatic sprinkler system shall be installed. This is group R, R3, 3.1, 3.9 should be permitted in group 3 occupancies. It's 9.3. 9.3, we'll go down here. Max sprinkler systems are occupancies. The building height does not exceed. So the reason I'm looking here at this R3 a little bit is if I can get away with an R3 sprinkler system, R3 occupancies up to and including 4 stories in height, the building is not exceeding 60 feet in math height, shall be permitted to be installed throughout with accordance with NFPA 13R. Okay, and so what I was going for there is as we get into different sprinkler systems, so I always think apartments. Apartments don't really get any bigger than 4 stories. Most of them are built at 3 stories, and they're built 3 stories for a reason, and that is to kind of deal with this limited fire sprinkler and different zones that are set in here. So I'm not going to dive deep into the code more than what I already have. That kind of gives you an idea of what happens in there, okay? All right. Let's go back here. Determine if a fire system is required. We did not check that. If I scroll down, you'll be able to check a fire system, but it's the same process. Okay. I'll move on to the next code section here that I want to cover. And delete this. Okay, occupant load is the next one. And so we saw on fire protection. So these 3 really hit together as they're going. So this is what's going to find how many occupants we should anticipate in this in our space. So this is the code allowed maximum occupancy. So if you've ever been to a restaurant or something and you see maximum occupant load, it's coming straight from this book here. Means of egress. Is that here? So it's going to talk about general means of egress, how to get out of the building, ceiling height, what's important, how we're going to get out of here. Here's our design occupant load. And so here's our charts that we can get. And so this is how many people we're going to have in here per square foot. So that's what it's allowed in these different areas. Fixed seating, outdoor areas, so it kind of covers everything. Then it looks at means of egress, and so how many exits do we need? How far a distance can we go until we need an exit? And so that really lays out a building so occupants can get out of there. And it all kind of connects together a little bit based on whatever your your occupant load is, whatever your building construction is, whether you're sprinkled or not, and how many occupants you have in the building. So it all kind of flows together to be able to get that building to meet code. Okay. So kind of summarize, just quickly summarize that. But let's look at a couple sets of prints. Okay, code sheet. The code sheet the architect is going to develop. All right. Now the code sheet's important because as a contractor, you need to be aware about the code plan and where it's set and what codes we're reading, where everything's flowing, because that's important because you're building to that. But let's take a look at a set of prints here. Okay, so here's one here. You guys may have seen this a couple classes that I've had. This is it's a library. And over here's the code summary. So you can look at the project summary, what codes they're using in here. That has to be listed. You can see our occupant loads assembly. So the whole building's an A3. Construction type is type 2B. Right, and so we looked at type 2. There's also different categories in there. Building height's important. What our square footage is important. Based on our square footage, you're going to see down here fire alarm detection required per this section. Right, auto sprinkler system, buildings to be sprinkled. All right, building occupancy here. This lists our building occupancy, and that's where we get from that section 10 in the code. So building section. That'll also lead to how many plumbing fixtures are required. And so most architecture designers will have this upfront code sheet that you will have to follow. All right. Now, as part of your homework here, I have a couple, a Southwest School Edition, all right, we can look at. It's got a code. So I'm going to ask a couple questions on that. And then I'll also look at this other fire station here that's posted. Right, and so I want you to look at this code section and figure out a couple items over there. So building codes in general is the way this is kind of this little project or lecture is going to work. So I want you to answer some questions here, review the video, kind of dive into a couple different sets of these prints, kind of find out what's going on, and also have you dive into just a little bit of the code. So be sure you have that website that I put here. Okay. I'll try to post this website on Blackboard too. That way you'll have easy access to it. All right. Thank you.